Okay, same location as my previous ending clip, but a little bit later. I'm gonna open up Recent Reads number 5. I'm just gonna go over what I'm reading because I haven't written anything in between those two clips. So, tentative plan for this week is to finish out the TBR. So, to do that, I need to read, I was gonna grab the second one in the series that I'm reading currently on audiobook. I need to read The Infinite Sea and The Last Star, and that will help me finish my second series of the month. And then I also have the audio of A Man Called Ove. So those are my audiobooks for the week. I'm gonna get back to listening to audiobooks. I didn't listen to any last week. And then physically, I have just one book left on the preset TBR, and that is Out of Order by Sandra Day O'Connor. I am 33 pages into this. This is probably going to be the lowest ranked of the week just because it's so basic, at least what I can read thus far. It's not even in-depth enough for a textbook. Then hopefully I'll get to some much better books. 2 more arcs that I have in physical form, and that is Gleanings, which are short stories from the world of the Arc of the Scythe, and then A Venom Dark and Sweet, which will also help me finish another series. And I will say, if I get through all of that, hold on one second. I'm going to go ahead and move it over to the TBR cart. If I get through all of that, I'm going to get to Still Alone. If I got to that and finished that this week, that would be 4 series finished in January. I'd be doing really well. So I'm going to get back to prepping for the next week, getting everything ready. I don't know that I'm going to do any more reading today because I've read a lot, but welcome to the next Recent Reads. Okay, so we have the first check-in of this Recent Reads, and that it's for the one that I knew I would finish quickly, and that is Out of Order by Sandra Day O'Connor. I knew from just about the first page that this would not end up being a book that I would super enjoy or get a lot or anything from. This is about 250 pages of a beginning primer on the Supreme Court. It says, the subtitle, Stories from the History of the Supreme Court. No, she's just going over different parts of it. I expected this to be more of maybe just sharing unique things that came up during the court or insights that she gained from working on the Supreme Court for over 25 years and perhaps connecting that back to other things that happened on the Supreme Court. No, you could find this information in just about any other sort of textbook on the Supreme Court, which is kind of disappointing. I'm not going to take the other 2 books off the list though, because those are memoirs and I want to give those a shot. I knew this one would probably have the least chance of making any sort of an impact. But it does help me cross off a book from the oldest, how do I say that? Clearing off the oldest books from my TBR on Goodreads. So I've got to figure out a way to say that. Anyway, I have finished that. I'm going to start A Venom Dark and Sweet, I think is what it's called. A Venom is the first one. It's the conclusion to the duology that I started that starts with A Magic Steeped in Poison. Last night I read Out of Order, just read it for the rest of the night and didn't do any cross-stitching. I wasn't really compelled to pick up The Infinite Sea. I'm still gonna read it. I'm not necessarily highly motivated to get back to it. So I don't know if I actually will hold on to these books after I finish them. Who knows? But I am going to try to get back into that tonight. Okay, welcome to Thursday morning. I have finished another book. I actually finished it last night, but I didn't update late at night. Not like I had any more light last night than I do right now. But the book I finished is book 2 of the 5th Wave series, The Infinite Sea. Now, I knew that there's certain series that I started when I read a lot more dystopian and post-apocalyptic, And I knew that there was a high possibility that I would end up DNFing the series. Just because, not because the books are bad, because I rated them high enough on initial read of the first book in the series that I was going to finish or attempt to finish the series. But that's not a genre, that's not a topic that I really enjoy anymore. It's not that it's bad and it disinterests me, I just am not interested in it. And so I noticed that after I listened to it a little bit, I think Sunday, that I didn't necessarily want to pick it back up again. I mean, I did, because obviously I finished the book, but I wasn't drawn to it. So I did read a recap of The Fifth Wave because it's been several years since I read it. But as I read this, I remembered more of it. And so the setting for this series is that there's basically been wave after wave of different sorts of things that aliens have been doing to take over and kill a bunch of humans. And now there's only like, say, 500 million, if that, left. Because they keep mentioning that there's 7 billion people that have died. And at the time of writing, there were 7.5 billion people in the world. At the first book, The Fifth Wave, there were, well, I won't say because that would be spoilers. But anyway, the fifth wave comes about in the first book. And then in this book, they're sort of dealing with the ramifications of that and sort of expanding the world. And there was nothing bad about this book. But what I noticed was the plot went from 0 to 100 right away and stayed at that level of tension the entire book. No downtime whatsoever. And there are people that like that sort of thriller and action sort of book. I don't. Give me some nuance. Give me some up and downs in the story. I don't mind tension. I think, that drives the plot. But in this case, there was never any let up and everyone was constantly in mortal peril. There were things that were done and there was lots of reveals, but somehow at the end of this book, you feel like you're in almost exactly the same place, just knowing a little bit of information. Okay, so I've decided to DNF the series. So I won't be picking up the third book in the series, The Last Star. Am I even interested in figuring out how it ends? Not really. I might look up how it ends. I might not. But that means that The Infinite Sea and The Last Star are going to get unhauled. So, I mean, that's fine. Some books will go to the book sale. And I crossed another series off my list. So I need to go and mark that I DNF'd the series. And one reason that I know that I made the right decision is because I decided to DNF the series, I didn't pick up The Last Star's audiobook. So I went to Ben Khaldoubi. I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm only about 12% in, but I can't get enough. Like, I didn't want to go to bed last night because that would mean that I would have to stop listening. Of course, I went to bed, on time, as I should. I adore that book so much, and I'm only 12% in, but I'll save more thoughts on that till later. Okay, so I'm back with another update because I finished another book. I actually finished it last night and then picked up another book, but obviously I'm not going to update right before bed. And the book I finished is A Venom, Dark and Sweet. So this helps me finish yet another series. I'm looking over at here because I have all the books stacked up for my wrap up, which I'm going to film in a few days probably because the end of the month is coming up. But that means that I have finished 1, 2, 3, now 4 series this month. I'm pretty pleased with that stat. I read the first book in this series a couple months ago. No, I read it as part of the Goodreads Choice Awards list. I did get that as part of a TBR Tailored Book Recommendations package, unboxing, whatever I'm going to call that. I don't know why my brain just stopped right then. That was the best box out of the 3 that I've gotten. No duplicates in that box. Off on a tangent there. Anyway, and I was really excited, especially because at that point I already had the arc for this book. So this is helping me with my arc goal. as well, but obviously it's published. I believe I picked up the physical copy at the Barnes & Noble sale. This book, I remember enjoying A Magic Steeped in Poison, which is the first book in the series, but feeling like there was something missing. Like it was good, but something was missing to get it to the great. And a lot of it felt like stuff that I've read before in other types of books like this. And I didn't get that in this book. But again, this book was really good, but not great. I think I'm giving this 4 stars. And I really enjoyed my experience with this. And I think part of what brought down my experience with A Magic Steeped in Poison was because I switched over to audiobook so I could keep going with another physical book and then an audiobook. And I remember thinking when I first picked this up that, not this, the A Magic Steeped in Poison, the writing was something that I had not seen before. And so I paid careful attention to that when I was reading this, and I noticed that it is in present tense, which is a choice because a lot of narratives are in past tense. And it worked really well, I thought, when it was Ning's perspective, the main character, because that was told in first person. So it was first person, present tense. In this book, Lin alternates with Ning and Kang, who is the now, well, I guess you could call him a love interest, someone who was involved in the plot in the first one. And I'm not going to say where he is now because that would give away something that happened in A Magic Steeped in Poison. But in his perspective, it's third person, present. And that just felt odd. As like I appreciated the stylistic choice and I could tell that it was different and it worked well. It was written well. It just felt weird to go from first person present to third person present. And I think that was part of the writing intrigue. And another thing in here, there was a lot of plot in the 2 books, and I understand why it was 2 books. However, we got to a point that had like 30 to 50 pages left, and I thought, we are just now getting to the climax of the story or approaching the climax of the story. We're not at the climax yet, and there's only 30 pages left. How are you going to give any sort of a decent resolution to this? And part of my quote-unquote fears were allayed by the fact that there's a lot packed into each page because the font is very small, but at the same time, there was not a lot of resolution. The way that things were solved was also a little bit confusing. I had to go back and reread a few sections to figure out what happened with the big bad because it was a former, like an old god who was coming back to power, but then he was like inhabiting human bodies. And it made sense, sort of, but what happened when they were trying to defeat him, I was confused at some points. It leaves off at a point where Lin could pick up in this world. She probably wouldn't tell the story of Ning and Kang, but it was a good read. It just felt a bit lacking. Like it didn't quite make its goal. I still will keep these books. I think they are beautifully written. I think my whole analysis on the tense of the verbs is more to figure out what I was noticing about the books more than to say that it was good or bad writing. It was definitely an interesting choice that I appreciated. And I've talked about this a lot, but I thought about it a lot as well. So I appreciated my read of this book. And I will say, Atmosphere on Cawpile got a 10. This book is so immersive and so beautifully described that you cannot help but feel like you are in that world. So hands down, this is one of the best for Atmosphere. So it is a 4-star though, but I enjoyed it. Okay, so I am here to wrap up this week's weekly reads with 2 book updates. It's early on Sunday morning, so I'm planning to read later on this afternoon. However, both of those books that I hope to finish out my January reads with are fairly long. One, I've started my reread of Return of the King, and I'm also going to be reading Stella Loon, which is book 9 in the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. Got it right that time. So I'm going to start off with the book that I finished this morning and then talk about the book that I finished last night. The book that I finished this morning is Gleanings by Neil Shusterman and various other co-authors. This is a collection, so it's a bunch of short stories from different points of view. Sometimes it was early on in the quote-unquote post-mortal age, the Scythedom, and sometimes it was later on. Sometimes it was after the time of the Arc of the Scythe trilogy. Sometimes it was during it. Wide variety of different stories, and I enjoyed just about every one. One of my favorites, I think, was one that was early on in the book where it's a scythe that's not all that pleasant. He's a bit egotistic, and he gleans this couple because he wants their dog. Okay, but there turns out there's something unique about that dog, which is the story, the point of the story. And this takes place during the time of the Arc of the Scythe trilogy because Rowan makes an appearance in this one. But I really enjoyed that one. And I liked all of the takes on just different stories from this world. It was so fun to return to the world and explore more about it. So I really enjoyed it. Were there any super outstanding stories? No. Were there any terrible stories? Also, no. All of them were pretty good and I enjoyed all of them. So this will probably end up as a 4-star read for me. Then we come to one that I knew as soon as I started reading was going to be a favorite, and now I'm really excited to read the other books that this author has written. It's a man called Ube. I loved this book. I became so invested in this book. It's very slow moving, slice of life. Frederick Bachman, in this book, he basically tells you without telling you that but there's a phrase that I'm trying, telegraphs. He telegraphs this upcoming really emotional, heartbreaking thing throughout the story. Several different things happen. He telegraphs that from a mile away, so you know it's coming. Can you prepare for it when it's actually revealed at that point in the story? No. Literally at the end of this, there was something that happened that made me start to tear up. Of course, I'm not going to say because it's towards the end of the book. I'm like, okay, if a book can make me do that, it's a 5-star read. The narrator, I don't remember the narrator's name, but apparently this is an award-winning actor who also does the narration for this. Absolutely brilliant. Another thing I love, this is translated from Swedish. So Frederick Bachman is Swedish. And he uses so much imagery in here. Very overt metaphors. And for some people that doesn't work, but I love them. I love metaphors. And yes, I've seen it done very heavy-handedly. And I guess some people might say that this one also does that. I disagree. I liked how he did this. And sometimes the metaphors would just make me snort with laughter. They were just so apt, so well done. I have recommended this book to my mom, and I cannot wait to watch the adaptation because I think Tom Hanks is going to do an excellent job as Ube. And I don't have enough good words to say about this, and the fact that this is the last book I talk about in this recent reads. I mean, January is off to an amazing start. This is more than likely, I haven't put it through Compile yet, but this is a 5-star read. I've had 3 5-star reads this month. 3 5-star reads, and so many 4.5 stars. Such a great month, and I'm so glad that I get to finish off this week's recent reads with this book. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.